Am I going to talk about it? Of course I'm going to talk about it. The subject matter is very personal to me. It is the lead story, page one, everywhere. And I know the principal, and I know the principal quite well. You are hearing a great deal about Jeff Zucker, who for the past 8 years has been my boss at CNN, and that is no longer the case. I'll tell you something. Last night, I read something that I'd never seen before. It's called the Warner Media Standards of Business Conduct. You might wonder, well, why have you never seen it before? It's because I'm not a Warner employee. I'm an independent contractor who works for CNN, which is why I'd never seen this book. I'd never participated in any of the training that I'm sure they offer to their employees. But those of you who work in corporate America, I'm sure there are books like this that govern your business practices and standards. For example, in this instance, there's a greeting up front from John Stankey, who's the AT&T CEO, who notes that acting with honesty, integrity, and transparency is what our customers expect of us, and it's what we should demand from each other. And then Jason Kilar, who is the CEO, says this document is a reflection of Warner Media's commitment to integrity, ethics, and decency in every aspect of our business. It is critical that each and every one of us lives up to this document. Reading further along, you get to page 19 out of 26, and there is this headline, Personal Relationships at Work. The company recognizes that people with whom employees have personal relationships may work at the company, apply to work at the company, or enter into a business relationship with the company, such as talent, vendors, or consultants. Listen to this part now. To avoid a conflict of interest, employees must not hire or supervise, directly or indirectly, someone with whom they have a personal relationship. And if you are in a position to influence the employment, advancement, or hiring of someone with whom you have a personal relationship or a business they are associated with or have an interest in, you must inform the HR department in advance of taking any action. And so Jeff Zucker, my boss at CNN, resigned yesterday after it came to light that he ran afoul of that requirement, of that language. It was discovered in the midst of the investigation pertaining to the firing of Chris Cuomo that he was having such a relationship. Some are seeing this as a payback. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Bottom line, now he's out. From the New York Times, Jeff Zucker resigned on Wednesday as the president of CNN, departing one of the most powerful positions in American media after acknowledging that he failed to disclose a romantic relationship with another senior executive at the network. The sudden end of Mr. Zucker's 9-year tenure stunned his newsroom, threw CNN's future into flux at a crucial moment because the network is about to introduce a high-stakes streaming service and its parent company, Warner Media, is on the verge of being acquired by Discovery. It then talks about Zucker having released a memo to the company yesterday. I'm looking at the memo, and it says this: as part of the investigation, so this is Jeff's explanation to fellow employees yesterday. As part of the investigation into Chris Cuomo's tenure at CNN, I was asked about a consensual relationship with my closest colleague, someone I have worked with for more than 20 years. I acknowledged the relationship evolved in recent years. I was required to disclose it when it began, but I didn't. I was wrong. As a result, I am resigning today. I came to CNN on January 28, 2013. Together, we had 9 great years. I certainly wish my tenure here had ended differently, but it was an amazing run, and I loved every minute. And then goes on to say that he's grateful and, with gratitude and much love, Jeff. Back to the New York Times. He was referring to Allison Gollust, CNN's executive vice president and one of the network's highest-ranking leaders, who said on Wednesday she would remain at CNN. Ms. Gollust said, Jeff and I have been close friends and professional partners for over 20 years. Recently, our relationship changed during COVID. I regret that we didn't disclose it at the right time. And then the New York Times notes that both Zucker and Gollust are divorced. So for not having disclosed a consensual relationship with a coworker, with a subordinate, he's out. I know and really like Jeff Zucker. 8 years ago, he hired me at CNN, and it's funny because I've long believed that we have had a very unique relationship. Unique insofar as it has been friendly, it has been incredibly direct. Like there's no BS and there are no wasted words, or have there been in my dealings with Jeff. I've also always believed that he always had my back. And you really can't ask more than that of a superior, of a boss, right? Yesterday, I realized that what I've believed was the uniqueness of this relationship that I had with Zucker is a feeling shared by many of my CNN colleagues. I tweeted something this morning. I said this: normally when a top exec resigns or is pushed out, employee knives come out to say what an SOB he was to work for. The Zucker resignation is the total opposite. The news is replete today with his CNN subordinates praising his fairness, his commitment, and his work ethic. And I agree with them. By the way, there's no reason to lie today. You might not want to speak out about a boss while he's your boss. He's no longer the boss. And as you read all these news accounts, take note of what I've just described. Sure, on Fox, you'll get a different story, although I found even Tucker muted, praising in a strange kind of a way of Zucker last night. In my case, here's the deal. Not only do I have personal affinity for him, but he allowed me to fulfill a dream. I've told the story before. Watch my one-man special on Hulu if you're remotely interested, when I walk through all of the setbacks of my career. And I tell the story about how I'd gotten tired of being the sixth man on the court, filling in for everybody. And of course, because of the size of my ego, deciding along the way, hey, I can do that job. Bill O'Reilly's fill-in, Joe Scarborough's television fill-in, Glenn Beck's headline news fill-in, Chris Matthews fill-in. Imus gets fired for, the slur that he offered about the Rutgers female basketball team. Who gets put in the chair? Me. 2008, David Gregory. They give him a show on MSNBC called Race for the White House. I was a several times a week guest. And, the other panelists included Rachel Maddow and Jay Carney. Trying to think of who else. David Gregory was the host. And when the campaign ended, Gregory gets asked to host Meet the Press. Rachel gets her gig on MSNBC, and Jay Carney goes on to become eventually the White House press secretary. Me, I went back to guest hosting for Chris Matthews on Hardball. And in my particular case, it all turned because when Zucker was hired in 2012, Warner hired Jeff Zucker to be the worldwide president, and I met him at a White House Correspondent Association dinner, struck up a conversation with him, stayed in contact with him. I came to SiriusXM, to the POTUS Channel, and continued to work for Chris Matthews. And, the deal for me was that when Matthews, much as it had been for O'Reilly, when Matthews would vacation, I'd get the call. Consequently, I gave up family vacations. Always they would be off between Christmas and New Year's. I was working. Always they would be off in August. I would work on their behalf. And finally, there was a time when my television fill-in work for Matthews got some notice in a trade publication. And as a result, I forwarded it to Zucker, and he invited me to come and to visit with him. I will never forget that meeting because it was the first follow-up face-to-face that we had had. It's the winter of 2014. So it's like January, February of 2014. And I met with him in his headquarters office at Columbus Circle, which is on the south end of Central Park, an icy day. It took me a hell of a long time to even get there. When I finally get to this meeting with the president of CNN Worldwide, Jeff Zucker, the meeting lasts all of 15 minutes. There was not going to be a pilot. There was not a lengthy conversation as to the show focus or the salary or anything. It was, I will give you an hour on Saturday. What hour do you want? And within 15 minutes, I'm out the door, and elated, obviously, because he allowed me to fulfill that dream. So I'm forever grateful. I'll tell you something else I remember about it is that the studio from which I would do the program initially was right outside his office. I mean, his office opened up, deliberately so, into the newsroom. Because as I will describe for you, hands-on doesn't begin to describe Jeff's running of the network. And it was a Friday night. I'm rehearsing for the launch of my program the following morning. The newsroom is empty. Zucker comes out on his way home, and he said to me, I feel comfortable telling you this now. And remember now, he was in his infancy, so this is not a reflection of the talent at the time. But he looked around the empty newsroom, and he said, watch, I'll get it close enough. Watch what everybody else is doing here and follow none of it. I mean, that's as good as it gets if you're someone who earns their keep with a microphone, which is to say, there are no limitations on you. Just go do your show. And so I began in March of 2014. He also told me when he hired me, I will make you a part of election nights. And he did it and delivered. He always delivered. If he said he was going to do something, I'm trying to explain to you why you hear such reverence from CNN people. The day after his resignation, he told me he would make me a part of election nights, and he did. I mean, 2016, that most momentous election cycle of any of our lives, I sat on that panel night after night, election, primary election, debate, whatever it was, night after night. Anderson would be the anchor, and I was on the side of the table where Nia Malika Henderson was to my left, then David Axelrod, then Gloria Borger. I'll tell you what else went on for every one of those nights. Jeff was in the control room. He, hands-on doesn't begin to describe him. Very granular in his approach. What I really wonder about him is how he was able to manage a worldwide media business and yet be on such an intimate knowledge level with so many employees, not just me. I mean, he ran the organization. He made decisions. Such a rarity from other work experiences that I have had. And you got to remember, this is an amazing guy. At age 26, he was the executive producer of the Today Show. He was Matt Lauer and Katie Couric's boss at age 26, where, they reached those milestones for the Today Show. He's the guy who hired Donald Trump. He's the guy who gave Trump the Apprentice show. He ran a meeting that became legendary every day at 9 a.m. I never participated in the meeting, never once, because I'm on air at that time. But that was the meeting where sort of the tone would get set for the day. Not in an embarrassing way to CNN. That guy from Project Veritas, you might remember, somehow crashed because they do them both in person and people could dial in. And somehow he was able to get, I forget his name and it doesn't even matter, but he was able to get access to the meetings and then treated like, we've got this scoop of bias because we have access to what goes on at the 9 a.m. meeting. There was like nothing there. He did set the tone, and others, maybe it's because I have a Saturday show and I'm not there and I'm not an employee per se. I felt, because I remembered what he told me that night when I was rehearsing my first show, I always felt like I could do whatever I thought was appropriate. I know that others would take literally any suggestion that he offered. Just last week, Jeff sent me an email of a news link. And just, this is like the last communication I received from him while he was running the business. I didn't do the story. Because I only get 4 segments a week, and I already had 4 good segments, and I think I knew enough to know that Jeff was sending this to me as something I could consider, but didn't necessarily need to do. And I respected the hell out of that. The fact that I didn't have to worry that the phone would ring and he would say to me, hey, I sent you that story. Why didn't you do it? He left me alone, and I appreciated it. He always knew, I think, that I wanted the network to go in a more centrist direction. Not lost on me is the fact that USA Today profiled me yesterday, the day of his resignation, and it's me saying there's a vacuum for centrism. I think he would have liked to have filled that void. I don't know why he didn't. I don't know why he didn't make more of a move to fill that void. It might be because of the whole Trump situation. You know, CNN airtime in 2016 absolutely played a significant role in Donald Trump's election. And I think that when the election ended, maybe Jeff and others thought that, you know, it was because they'd given him too much airtime. And you obviously know just how south the relationship between Zucker and Trump turned thereafter. Trump sent out a statement saying about Zucker, calling him a name. And then I thought this was interesting. Zucker said, I told you at the outset why Zucker resigned. Because he didn't disclose a consensual relationship that he was having with a coworker. Interesting Trump's word choice. He's been terminated for numerous reasons, says Trump, but predominantly because CNN has lost its way with viewers and everybody else. And Trump made no reference to the relationship aspect, which I just thought was really interesting. I'll tell you something else that his critics get wrong about him. He is not some wild-eyed liberal. And how do I know that's the case? I know that's the case because I had so many personal conversations with him where he would tell me that the things that he heard me say on television often reflected his view. We had that conversation the last time that we were together. If you want to read coverage of Zucker's resignation, I recommend, not because it's biased, but because it has the most inside information, is that you take a look at Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy's coverage for CNN, which is at my website and in my newsletter today. At the outset, they say, you know, look, we're talking about our boss. This is, quote, an admittedly very strange story to cover. They then go on to make the point that I've been trying to make here, which is the reverence that so many CNN employees and personalities that you know hold for him. Quote, upon learning of Zucker's exit, many CNN staffers felt, as Dana Bash said during a tense D.C. bureau meeting with Warner Media CEO Jason Kilar, that, quote, the punishment didn't fit the crime. Internally, there's a lot of confusion about why this happened. With that in mind, is another shoe to drop? Some observers think so, but nobody really knows, and nothing has dropped yet. Quote, for many CNN staffers, something isn't adding up. NY Mag, New York Mag's Sean McCreesh wrote. I must say, I share that view. Did he run afoul of that disclosure policy that I read to you at the outset? He did, and he acknowledges it. And I don't know why, given that they were both divorced, I don't know why they didn't make that acknowledgement. You're going to read a lot of stuff in the coverage that talks about how this was such a well-known secret. It was not well known to me, but I'm not there physically every day. I'm not even there once a week. I do my show from Philly. So, you know, as Gordon Gekko would say, I'm Bud Fox, who's like the 10th man on the deal. I have no knowledge. And frankly, I don't care. I don't care. Is it an issue for them and for their former spouses? I don't know. But I can tell that the CNN sentiment internally, if Dana Bash is saying this, she's a straight shooter. For Dana Bash saying it seems like the punishment exceeds the infraction. One of the prevailing theories, this is back now to Oliver Darcy and to Brian Stelter. One of the prevailing theories involves Chris Cuomo, who was fired by Zucker in early December amid revelations that Chris, aiding his governor brother Andrew, Zucker's memo said he acknowledged that Gollust had that Gollust relationship when he was asked about it during the investigation into Chris Cuomo's tenure at CNN. In other words, Cuomo, I don't know if there's formal litigation. He certainly hired counsel, but Chris Cuomo is seeking the pay that he would have received had he not been terminated. And in the context of that legal saber rattling, this became an issue. Did Chris drop a dime? He denies it. I'll share that with you as I summarize just a little bit more of the coverage. Before Zucker fired Cuomo, CNN retained Cravath, a white-shoed law firm, to review the matter. That probe has been ongoing, while at the same time Cuomo has pursued a legal battle with the network, reportedly in a bid to get paid millions that remained on his contract. Numerous staffers have been questioned by Cravath lawyers, sources said, and it was Zucker's turn last week, so all of this came to a boil in the past 7 days. Another tidbit, just skipping around the coverage. Puck's Dylan Byers, who's been a guest here, wrote that Kylar then brought it to the attention of John Stankey, the AT&T CEO. Quote, no matter what he thought of Zucker or Kylar, Stankey surely had no appetite for tolerating any scandal that might scuttle the impending Warner Media Discovery deal. And so, in the end, both Kylar and Zucker will soon be looking for new jobs. Apparently, there was a meeting yesterday where Kylar was grilled by some CNN employees. And in the Wall Street Journal today, it says this: during the question and answer session, anchor Jake Tapper said that former CNN host Chris Cuomo hired a lawyer who seemed eager to leak damaging information about Zucker unless they gave Cuomo severance. Quote, an outside observer might say, this is Jake Tapper yesterday, according to the Wall Street Journal. Well, it looks like Chris Cuomo succeeded. He threatened Jeff. Jeff said we don't negotiate with terrorists, and Chris blew the place up. How do we get past the perception that this is a bad guy winning? A spokesman for Cuomo declined to comment, yada, yada, yada. Elsewhere in the media, I've seen reporting that the Cuomo people say that's just not true. Final thing that I'll say about Jeff Zucker, and it comes from the Reliable Sources newsletter from Brian Stelter. CNN staffers have known Zucker as a survivor. He has survived colon cancer, heart surgery, and other health setbacks. He climbed the highest levels of NBC Universal, fell to the bottom, then became its most impactful leader of CNN since Ted Turner. Not long ago, it seemed as if he'd lost a battle with Kylar and AT&T and would leave CNN. And then suddenly, with his friend David Zaslav's Discovery taking over, Kylar was out and Zucker was in and looked like he'd survive again. That sudden turn made today's news all the more surprising. I wouldn't count him out. He's 56 years old. I have this vision of the last time that I was physically in his presence is when I was guest hosting, the Cuomo 9 p.m. time slot, and he called me up to his office. After hours, everybody was pretty much gone. I remember there was a security guard in close proximity, and we went behind closed doors and just had our customarily brief, candid, bada-bing conversation. And that's it. And that is it. I know he'll land on his feet. I'm sure he doesn't need to do anything. If he chooses to do nothing, that would be just fine. And I'll tell you this flat out, you know where I'm coming from. I hope I get the chance to work with him at some point in the future. At some point in the future, I would really like that. I hold him in the highest regard, and you can all, based on what I told you, make up your own mind as to whether, as Dana Bash said, the punishment outstrips the crime in this case. To avoid a conflict of interest, employees must not hire or supervise someone with whom they have personal relationship, yada, yada, yada. Stelter says people are speculating whether there's another shoe to drop. I'm also, one last observation, mindful of the fact that, I understand why these rules exist. But I'm also thinking of the number of relationships, marriages, families that have been built based on workplace interaction. It doesn't seem, in this case, it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair if this is all there is to the story. But you know where I'm coming from. You've heard my bias. I have a great personal affinity for him and will always remember that he gave me the opportunity to fulfill a professional dream. Yeah, that's what I want to say about Jeff Zucker. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a reaction, call You know the number. I'm at 855-486-1776. I get that I don't know if advantage is the right word. I've got an insight here that you couldn't possibly have unless you're calling me from Hudson Yards right now, which is where CNN is located. But you're watching the story. You know the workplace environment. You can react to all of this. And we can talk about the media environment and climate as well. I'm at 855-486-1776, 855-486-1776.